Let's do a weird experiment. Think about the last political speech you heard, or a TED talk, anything. Most modern speeches follow the same golden rule: be easy to understand. Short sentences, simple words, one big idea. Repeat it, smile, drink water, and as someone who joined a lot of speech competition, this is what I actually do. And then there's this guy.
Just as I have a dream that my four little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
I have a dream. It's big, it's poetic, it's full of metaphors and history and Bible references and lines that sound like they were carved into marble on purpose. Consisting of about 1,667 words, and it ran for about 17 minutes, riddled with difficult war terms and a full rhetorical defiance that practice, and yet it's easy to follow. Not easy like a children's cartoon, but easy like you always know where you are and you always know where he's going. So, how did he do that?
It's August 28, 1963. 250,000 people gather in Washington, D.C. at the Lincoln Memorial. A crowd so big it looks like the city is wearing people as a jacket. This event is officially called the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, and King knows exactly where he's standing, literally and symbolically, voicing economic, political, and moral messages of civil rights to 250,000 people in front of the Lincoln Memorial. Although these people, or the people who have heard it since, King's word imprinted an image of what Black Americans were fighting for and why, fully 100 years after Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves with the Emancipation Proclamation. But here's the weird thing. King does use fancy language sometimes. He talks about a promissory note and gradualism and the fierce urgency of now, but he almost always ties big words to simple pictures. America wrote a check to black citizens, then it bounced. Justice should roll down like water. The nation should rise from a dark valley to a sunlight path. This is the trick. Even when the vocabulary is high, the imagery is human. Which brings us to the first tool, alliteration. Alliteration is when nearby words start with the same sound. It's the verbal version of a drum beat, and it makes language sticky.
In desolate valley, this sweltering summit of the Negro's legitimate discontent, the marvelous new militancy out of great trials and tribulation, dignity and discipline. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check.
King uses it like a preacher because he was a preacher. Alliteration doesn't change the meaning, it changes the memory. It's one reason you can recall lines from this speech even if you heard it once in school while you're half asleep. Now we get to the King's superpower, anaphora, repeating the same words at the start of repeated sentence or clauses. This is the ultimate keep the audience with you tool because it works like signposts on a highway. You always know where you are. King uses anaphora everywhere. For example,
but 100 years later, 100 years later, 100 years later, 100 years later, but we refuse to believe. We refuse to believe. Now is the time. Now is the time. Now is the time. Now is the time. We can never be satisfied. We can never be satisfied. We cannot be satisfied. We can never be satisfied. I have a dream. I have a dream. I have a dream. I have a dream. I have a dream today. Let freedom ring. Let freedom ring. Let freedom ring. Let freedom ring. Let freedom ring.
the next tool is allusion. Allusion is when you reference something your audience already knows. History, religion, some, so you can borrow the meaning without explaining it from scratch. King does this constantly. He alludes to Lincoln and the Emancipation Proclamation. Because he is standing in Lincoln's shadows on purpose, he alludes to Americans' founding ideals, the Constitution, and the Declaration of Independence as a promissory note. He alludes to the Bible like justice rolls down the waters and every folly shall be exalted. Now, compare that to a lot of modern political speaking. A common strategy today is accessibility by simplicity. Shorter sentences, simpler vocabulary, more direct phrasing. Because wide audience is Well, wide. For example, analysis of modern presidential addresses have noted that Donald Trump's major speeches often score at a relatively low reading grade level compared to other recent presidents, aiming for broad accessibility. And honestly, that approach makes sense. If you want to reach everyone, you don't speak like you're trying to impress your lecturer. So, how does King break the rule and still succeed? Here's the answer. He doesn't rely on simplicity of words, he relies on simplicity of structure. He takes complex truth and delivers it in a shape your mind can hold. Here's the promise, here's the betrayal, here's the urgency, here's the method, here's the vision, here's the chorus. So, even if you don't understand every term, you understand the direction, you understand the feeling, and feeling is the part that moves people, which left the strongest part of Martin Luther King's speeches: improvisation. By many accounts, King's prepared remarks were strong, but then, in the moment, the speech transforms. The night before the march, King and his team worked late polishing a draft. It was carefully built. History, injustice, urgency, a call for action. Strong, controlled, prepared speech. But in the middle of delivering it, standing in front of the Lincoln Memorial, looking out at a sea of faces, something changed. Accounts from that day describe a moment when gospel singer Mahalia Jackson, watching from nearby, called out to him, "Tell them about the dream, Martin." And King made a choice that most speakers are terrified to make. He stepped away from the prepared text and moved into language he had used before in churches and smaller gatherings, language that wasn't just persuasive but personal. When he began repeating, "I have a dream," in that moment, he stopped only arguing for justice and started showing it. Each "I have a dream" is a picture you can hold in your mind. Children, towns, mountains, freedom ringing from specific places. It becomes concrete, visual, and it's human. And that's why it becomes unforgettable. A prepared speech can be perfect and still stay on paper, but an improvised vision, spoken like it's happening right now, it can move through a crowd like electricity. King's improvisation made the speech feel less like a statement and more like a shared promise. Not just, "This is what should happen," but "This is what we are going to build together."
You see, you don't need to sound smart to say something important, but if you are going to use the words, use it the way King did, to widen the circle, to pull people toward each other, to turn me into we. Because somewhere out there, right now, the world is full of speeches that want to win, and not enough speeches that want to heal.
The old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.